did want to say thank you to Mary and Scott for organizing the dinner last night. And
It was our pleasure.
and
Carol did most of the work. We just have to be honest.
we always thank
Right.
we always thank Carol and Brenda for doing an outstanding job. And of course, our board is extremely multimodal. So, Mr. Kasowitz, do you want to report on the adventures from last evening?
I would just say that we did have an adventurous group last night. We used every one of the Lime scooters that we reserved, and we had a fun trip over to the restaurant. Yeah, a good time was had by all.
And everyone had a helmet. Can I point that out?
Everyone had a helmet. We made sure the safety considerations were well taken care of.
Okay. And so with that, Director Mitchell, anything that from yesterday we just needed to add?
Just a few updates on our Amtrak ridership, and I did want to note that this month we just introduced a new discount, and we've got another one coming up, and this is really in response to some of the feedback that we've been hearing from the CTB Rail Committee about the need to continue to improve and increase Amtrak ridership, and that it's really about ridership, not revenues, but most importantly to get as many people on the trains as we can. We did just introduce a 15% discount for any riders that are traveling within the Commonwealth or from Virginia to DC. We also have a student discount that's going to be a 25% discount for full-time students, and that will be starting in June. So we're very excited to see that. And ridership overall, we had a great month in Virginia. Our ridership in April was up 14.8% over last April, although I should caution that last April was when we were in the middle of construction of Vaca Yard, and we had some service interruptions there, so I think that probably had something to do with the year-over-year comparison. But our year-to-date ridership in Virginia is up 4.3%. So most importantly, when we made changes back in March to optimize some of the new schedules in Hampton Roads, and we extended the new route from Richmond to Hampton Roads, we actually since then have seen a net increase of over 8,500 riders in April alone. So that's a big increase. It was an increase of 16% compared to the same month of last year. And so we're very excited that those schedule changes and the new route to Norfolk seem to really be increasing ridership. So our ridership for the Roanoke route as well has been up 9.5% year over year over April of last year. So in all, again, a 4.3% increase year to date. So we're very proud of seeing those ridership increases throughout the state. In addition to that, we did give a report yesterday to the CTB Rail Committee about DC to RVA, and that study is virtually complete. We are waiting for our record of decision right now, which is at USDOT, and we hope to have that released. Once that is released, which we hope will be within the next several weeks, we'll be entering a 30-day public comment period. And then after we respond to comments, we hope to have the record of decision finalized by this summer. And again, the timing of that is especially important because it's related to our Atlantic Gateway grant, which also needs to be obligated by the end of September of this year. So anyway, positive developments there, and we hope to see that record of decision soon. We also continue to coordinate with the District Department of Transportation on the Long Bridge study. We expect that the draft environmental impact statement for that will be out this summer. And they, along with our staff and VRE staff as well, are continuing to coordinate with the National Park Service over some environmental mitigation measures, but we look forward to seeing that draft EIS over the summer, and that again will kick off a new public involvement period. So, and that's all I've got right now.
Thank you. Anyone from the Rail Committee wanted to add? Robin, good morning. Commissioner, anything? We had riveting and robust discussions yesterday.
And colorful.
And colorful.
No, I think we're going to be back before the board.
Oh, can you hear? I can see. Thank you for doing that in the back.
So.
Is it on?
It should be.
This side of the table.
Maybe now? Okay. So nothing new to report other than we're going to be back before the board with those two issues, cost estimating and our performance measures quite a bit over the next 4 to 5 months. So certainly more to come on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Can you all hear me? Okay. Following up on that, I know some of you last night thought I was having just fun, but we were also working last evening because of the presentation that Garrett gave on the construction cost estimating going forward and how critical that is to the credibility of Smart Scale. We are going to put together a task force. Susan Keene is going to be our leader on that team. And I will say that Mr. Kaskowitz and Mr. Malvin agreed to chair that with the CTB. So anyway, we look forward to that task force. You know, the results of our task force have been really excellent. So this is a critical point, and so gentlemen, thank you very much for saying yes. I will also just mention that last night we learned that a former board member, Olivia Libby Welsh, passed away on May 10th. I did not know her, but I've heard so much about her. She represented the CTB Stanton district. She was a tremendous leader, and I don't want to plagiarize your words last night, Mr. Walton, but I think you called her the unsinkable Molly Brown. Was that it? So, Mr. Whitworth, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I did know Libby, and she was a very active businesswoman in Stanton for over 40 years and 50 years, extremely active in both local and state civil affairs, and served enthusiastically on this board. Her voice was strong, and I would say she was very much a strong advocate for the rural and the Stanton districts, and so she loved serving on this board. I know that.
So, anyway, thank you for saying that, and I just thought it's important just to recognize someone who had committed so much. So thank you, Mr. Walton, for bringing that to our attention. So with that, I believe we will just go ahead and move into our action meeting. And is there anything else? Okay. So we will adjourn the workshop. We will now move into our action meeting. And we always begin with public comments. I believe that a number of folks have signed up. Let's see. Have signed up to speak today. We ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. We do not respond as you all are presenting to us, so that we can make sure to allow everyone to have an opportunity to speak. I just saw that. And so I do know that we have a few elected officials with us this morning. I believe I just saw Delegate Levine walk in, and we have Delegate LaRocque. And we do have Christian Dorsey, who we spent a lot of time together this week so far, who's chair of the Arlington Board, with us. So I know Nick just walked outside. Do you remember yesterday as we were trying to pull up the... So good morning, Delegate Levine. You managed to walk in actually at the perfect time, and then you disappeared. So we're ready to move into our public comment period, and so we just invite you to speak first if you'd like to.
I was just signing up, actually.
Oh.
That's why I went out. I thought I should sign up. Well, thank you all very much for being here. I think I speak for virtually everyone in the district I represent in Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax to say we've been waiting for this a long time. We all call it Route 1 because we don't want to call it by its real name. Jefferson Davis obviously was the President of the Confederacy. He was chosen for that reason to honor this highway in 1922, and he represented Mississippi and had no particular ties to Northern Virginia. The road is considered offensive by the vast majority of my constituents, who do not want to be celebrating and honoring a man who certainly does not represent Arlington values. And so I am really looking forward to this name change. Many of you know, in fact, I brought No, I'd be first, so I wasn't.
Oh,
completely
I'm so
prepared.
sorry.
That's all right. No, but I actually have the letter, the original letter from Attorney General Mark Herring. It's a very, very good legal analysis. We worked together to make this happen. And I really don't have that much to say, except that it really needs to happen as soon as possible. A number of businesses already are pushing very hard for the change. I'm sure you'll hear that from other people in the public comment for a couple reasons. One, we have people getting lost because the highway, as you know, was changed in Alexandria just at the beginning of this year, and so people don't know where they are. The Google Maps actually shows it as Richmond Highway, but then they go and they see different road signs and they're confused, and we've heard accounts of people being lost up to 30 minutes. The other thing, and more important consideration even than that, is that a number of businesses are losing business because of the name of the highway. In fact, this very hotel that we're sitting in doesn't say it's on Jefferson Davis Highway. It says it's 2799 Richmond Highway because this hotel does not want to lose business to people who don't want to do things on Jefferson Davis Highway. There have been conventions that have been canceled. So it's actually very bad for Arlington business. It's very bad for Virginia business. Obviously, in this region, it's very easy if you're doing something in the national capital area to go to the District of Columbia, to go to Maryland. And if you have groups that don't want to be on this highway, we're going to lose business in Virginia. So there are practical reasons as well. But I'd be lying if I didn't say the main reason is because people tell me they don't want to walk down the street, they don't want to work on this street. African American children look up at the sign and they say, oh, wow, either Virginia's really backward or I guess they don't respect me here. It's important to remember one more thing, that this road is not historical. It does not come from the time of Jefferson Davis. It comes from 1922. It comes from 2 generations after the Civil War. So it wasn't even put up in his time. And of course, he wasn't here, he was in Richmond. It was put up at the time of the maximum Ku Klux Klan, a time when white supremacy reigned in Virginia, a time when most African Americans in Virginia could not vote. They had constitutional right to vote, but Virginia laws kept them from voting. This was done at a time, these are the time throughout the country when you see a lot of neo-Confederate activity in 1922. And it was done specifically to terrorize the black population and encourage them to sort of know their place. So it wasn't really even about Jefferson Davis. It was about putting blacks down at that time. And so I really think it's critical. These are not Arlington values. I don't think they're Virginia values. And the one thing's for sure, and I'm sure the Chairman Dorsey will talk about, Arlington does not want this. And one of the best parts of the law change in 2012 is it allows localities to name their own roads, and Arlington emphatically does not want this. And I know that the CTB generally respects localities' wishes to rename highways. So for confusion and frankly for morality, I really appreciate if I would change the name today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. Thank you very much. Chairman Dorsey.
Good morning, Chairperson Valentine and members of the CTB. Thank you very much for your prompt consideration of Arlington County's unanimously approved resolution just last month to rename Jefferson Davis Highway to Richmond Highway within our jurisdiction. I am Christian Dorsey, Chair of the Arlington County Board, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to explain our request and to answer any questions that you might have. As Delegate Levine noted, Arlington has long desired to rename the portion of this highway commonly referred to locally by its federal designation, Route 1. We have included the renaming as a priority in the past several of our legislative packages, and our interest predates the recent national reevaluation of Confederate monuments. Interest was further heightened as the city of Alexandria, our neighbor, renamed the highway Richmond Highway within its city limits. The City Council's decision followed 3 years of study and extensive public engagement that included representatives from Arlington. We engaged because we believed that if our neighboring jurisdiction adopted a new name, it would be compelling for Arlington to follow suit. With the longstanding Richmond Highway in Fairfax County, our renaming request would allow for a contiguous road with the same name from Fort Belvoir all the way to the Potomac River. Now, as part of this outreach, we have reached out to every business and residence along the highway in Arlington. and most have expressed strong support for changing the name. Indeed, the public comment that we have received overall from our community has been overwhelmingly positive. If the CTB approves the name change, we will work proactively with those businesses and residents to ensure a smooth transition to the new name. I also note that in our resolution that is before you, the county board did say that if the CTB so desires, we support a renaming designation as Richmond Boulevard rather than Highway to better reflect the adjacent densities, transportation modes, and land use planning of this very urban road network. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have on that particular point. But I do want to conclude by noting that there are reasons beyond the ease of travel and a good transportation network. That is certainly your primary interest. But there are other reasons for changing the name of the highway. Different perspectives on the Confederacy and its leaders have and will long endure as subjects for public debate. What is clear, though, is that Jefferson Davis had no known connection to this region where the road bears his name. And the very designation of a Jefferson Davis highway was a direct and antagonistic response to the proposed Lincoln Highway. This was during a period of the early 20th century where the second iteration of the Ku Klux Klan was ascendant, and acts such as seeking memorials to Jefferson Davis symbolized a return to white supremacy in the Jim Crow South. That is not our Virginia of today, and by granting our request, you will be affirming that fact. Thank you all again for taking up this issue. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. Delegate LaRock. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I feel a little disadvantaged in as much as Nick had several slides dedicated to spinning my remarks from Monday night, and I have a mere 3 minutes to try to unspin some of them, but I'll do my best. These are just pictures of Nick's slides, comparisons, scoring. We asked for that, I think, over a month ago. We're stonewalled. When the scoring was redone, the percentages we asked Nick to use were not the same percentages that he used. So read into that whatever you'd like. When we did it, and he was right, it was fairly easy, cumbersome, but easy. We saw highway projects rising to the point where I think they should have been funded. I love the next slide here, which says 4.5 billion going to highways throughout the region. Now, if that's meant to point out that highways shouldn't be funded in round 3, I think it actually sends the opposite message. This is not just smart scale funding. When you look at all of the monies that are dedicated to highways, they're dedicated for a good reason, because people drive on highways. Highways are very effective at mitigating congestion. So certainly not an exhibit to discourage you from funding highways in round 3. A couple bang for the buck slides. This shows Crystal City Metro around Route 1, 123 Fleet. Puts Crystal City Metro at the top, but to get there, it has to have a 3.78, over half its score coming from land use, and the rest are access, environmental, economic development. Very little for congestion mitigation. This was really the one that got my attention. So bang for the buck again. Down toward the bottom, where the no funding recommendations start to filter in, Fleet, no. Route 1, 123, no. Under that, there's that Crystal City Metro station again, recommended for funding. With a congestion mitigation score of 1.7, putting it higher than Route 7 widening, Route 9 to Dulles Greenway. Now, that Route 7 widening is one very close to where I live, and it's not just my favorite because, or one of my favorites, because it's in the area I serve. I see almost every day miles of traffic backed up, literally miles, where two main roads feed into each other. That's congestion. You widen the road, you mitigate it. Thousands of people get to where they're going faster. Crystal City Metro Station scored higher for congestion mitigation because it will save some people a little bit of time walking to a second entrance, maybe a few hundred feet. Congestion mitigation there, if that's the way the system weights it, the system is just not working. 3 projects, 92% of Northern Virginia funding recommended in the first original round going to the Crystal City, to transit, bike paths, and so on, including the second entrance to the Crystal City Metro Station. Each of these projects, I think, clearly has a nexus to the Amazon deal, which is an economically driven project. And it proves that the legislative intent, which is to mitigate true congestion, is not being honored. Loudon puts in, I think, close to $30 million a year times 2 years, $60 million to get $1.3 million out of this. Now, I realize we fared better in other years, but we have projects that are very, very worthwhile and should be making it to the top of this list. We took a giant step forward in 2014 when we moved away from a system where a few powerful people directed the funding to projects that are worthwhile. I fear that if you pass these recommendations favoring transit-heavy, development-oriented funding project funding, that we will have moved a giant step backwards. Route 15 is another project that I know was talked about in the previous meeting. It is a life or death situation to fix a road that is decades overdue to be upgraded. There's funding for a portion of that. I would very much appreciate you consider giving that some sort of emergency consideration. Another fatality chalked up to the death count a couple days ago. Those are the consequences, in addition to many, many, many hours left, people spent waiting to get home in standstill traffic. And again, 92% of our total Northern Virginia funding, keeping a promise that was made by the governor, is just not the way it should work. Thanks for the opportunity to address the board.
Thank you. Look at LaRock. Jay Corballis? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Jay Corballis. I'm Vice President of Public Affairs with JBG Smith. On behalf of JBG, I'd like to welcome you all to National Landing. It's a very fitting venue for your work. National Landing has benefited greatly from a succession of forward-looking investments from the Commonwealth in transportation projects that have helped make this area one of the most connected places in the country, really, from a multimodal perspective. Regarding Route 1, I'd like to echo the testimony from Chairperson Dorsey. Our CEO, Matt Kelly, who couldn't be here this morning, submitted a letter for your consideration on this subject, and I'd just like to paraphrase that. As important as our physical connectivity is, equally as important is the spirit of openness that it's helped foster in National Landing and Northern Virginia more broadly. One of our greatest assets has been our ability to attract the best and the brightest workforce, in part by bringing in people from diverse backgrounds from all over the world with skills that have helped drive our economy. Rather than celebrating that point of pride, the current name does the opposite. Just as the road is poised to be transformed to remove a physical barrier within National Landing, we encourage you to take this step and remove a symbolic barrier by changing the name. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to say Delegate Rich Anderson, formal delegate. How are you? Welcome. The Honorable.
Yeah, well, good morning.
Good morning.
Secretary Valentine, members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rich Anderson. I am a resident of Woodbridge, and for 8 years was privileged to represent a portion of Prince William County in the House of Delegates. So my whole purpose in being here this morning is with the latest round of recommendations for Smart Scale from the Northern Administration. I simply felt compelled to speak about the methodology and its impact on Prince William County. And I'd like to make these at the 50,000-foot level. I'd like to do so without speaking about specific projects, either the inclusion or exclusion thereof, but the impact that it has on what I feel is original legislative intent. So as a member of the House of Delegates in 2014, I was present for the Smart Scale discussions when Delegate Chris Stolley of Virginia Beach brought House Bill 2 to the floor. And I felt so strongly about it, I lent my name as a co-patron. Not many people did, but I lent my name as a co-patron and participated fully in those discussions. Not only as a member of the House Transportation Committee, but as a member of the House Appropriations Committee, a member of the House Transportation Sub of Appropriations. And so based on my participation, my understanding, my vote in 2014 for House Bill 2, I believe that the latest administration recommendations fail to honor our original legislative intent. And that's my message today. So during the current biennium, Prince William County has sent literally tens of millions of dollars to the Transportation Trust Fund. And during the scoring recommendations earlier this year, received 0, and I know there is some discussion about amending that, but originally received in these recommendations 0 smart scale funding in return. Funding that I think should have been applied to Prince William County and one of the busiest corridors in Northern Virginia. To me, and my memory from 2014, original legislative intent was that congestion mitigation was to be the preeminent consideration. And I just simply feel that the latest round failed to honor our original legislative intent. And so an urgent necessity exists to rethink the scoring methodology, as well as the weighting factors that determine scores in the apportionment of smart scale funding. Perhaps to the degree that the legislative branch of Virginia state government should partner with the executive branch of state government and reassert itself during the 2020 legislative session in a way that returns to this original legislative intent and ensures outcomes for congested areas such as Prince William County. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Is it Krister All? All? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the CTB. I'm Krister All, Chair of the CCCRC, one of the Arlington County Board's advisory groups with 2 unusual characteristics. Its focus is on the successful implementation of development plans for a specific area, namely Crystal City, and its composition includes representatives of all the relevant stakeholder groups, business owners, residents, landowners, adjacent. However, on the topic before you regarding the renaming of the highway that cuts through down the middle of our Crystal City community, there was a remarkable meeting of minds. Our members recognized that here we have an issue where the overall success and well-being of our entire community requires that we come together in unison to offer strong and broad support for the proposal of a renaming of this highway. We need to recognize that right at this time, the Commonwealth and the county have embarked on an endeavor with the potential for enormous growth, vitality, and financial solidification in our local area, our county, and for that matter, the entire region. This requires an informed attention to image, branding, and explicit efforts to make our area attractive to new businesses, residents and visitors alike. We should not knowingly leave in place any aspects which could constitute impediments or controversy in our way forward. Accordingly, on behalf of the stakeholder groups represented in the CCRC, I urge you to act in favor of the resolution before you, which in turn is based on the resolution recently adopted by the Arlington County Board. But may I also add, on behalf of a colleague who is unable to attend here today, the president of the local Crystal City Civic Association, who want to note for the record that very strongly the Civic Association supports the renaming. In fact, with some of the arguments already articulated here with Delegate Levine and Chairman Dorsey, they have had concerns for the longest time about the difficulties in achieving this renaming long time ago. And that was with great pleasure that I realized that after having been told by the county that there was no such authority, that you now, through the confirmation by the Commonwealth Attorney General, have that kind of authority, and we are really therefore, from the civic association standpoint, as noted among the representatives in my group, strongly supporting this renaming. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Stacey Stewart?
Chairperson Valentine and members of the board, thank you for allowing for public testimony to speak on this very important issue today. I'm Stacey Stewart. I'm president and CEO of the March of Dimes. And on behalf of the March of Dimes, I'd like to express our support for the changing of the name of Route 1 and Jefferson Davis Highway in Arlington to Richmond Highway. As a leading nonprofit organization fighting for the health of all moms and all babies, March of Dimes is committed to diversity, inclusion, and impact. However, we cannot fight for the health of all moms and babies if we do not hold these values to be true. In 2017, when we made the decision to leave our decades-old headquarters in White Plains, New York, our Board of Trustees approved our move to the Washington, D.C. area. Our exhaustive search led us to our exciting, innovative space in the greater National Landing community. It was Virginia's status as a leader in technology and innovation, a passion for the health and wellness of all families, inclusive growth, and National Landing's inviting and family-friendly environment that led our board to make the ultimate decision to choose the Commonwealth as our new home. However, the current name of Route 1 is counter to these values. And frankly, I want to say here today that my reason for being here is not because of branding, and it's not because of image. It's because this name of this highway absolutely does not represent the values that we represent. It doesn't represent the values of this community. It doesn't represent the values of the Commonwealth, and it simply must change. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. And while he and the states of the Confederacy fought to maintain independence from the North and the Union, they also fought to uphold the dehumanizing and the brutal institution of slavery. Jefferson Davis Highway, as others have noted, was named in 1922 in response to a request from the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the UDC, an association of Confederate descendants that have been working to preserve and rewrite Civil War history amid a wider push in the South for Confederate monuments to uphold white supremacy. As the highways wended across the United States, proponents of UDC's historical vision were groups and individuals who also supported enacting and supporting Jim Crow laws, laws that enforced racial segregation and perpetuated inequity. These memorials are divisive, and they act as painful daily reminders of our country's dark and shameful history. While we cannot change what has already occurred in our nation's past, we can forge a fair and a just path forward, one that is inclusive, equitable, inspirational, prosperous, and positive. We owe it to our fellow Virginians, our neighbors, employees, friends, and family to no longer commemorate those who have fought to uphold values that represent a painful and an oppressive past and are simply not reflective of who we are as a community and what we want to represent moving forward. It is time to end this symbolic division by changing the name to reflect the forward-looking aspirations of the greater National Landing community and to provide consistency with our neighbors in Alexandria and Fairfax who have already renamed Route 1 to Richmond Highway. So on behalf of the March of Dimes, I would like to strongly urge you to follow the example set by Alexandria and Fairfax and change the name to Richmond Highway. Thank you, Chairperson Valentine and members of this board for taking up this important issue, and we recognize the urgency and the magnitude of its importance to the city's collective growth. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being. Scott Pedowitz? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Secretary and members of the board. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Pedowitz. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber supports the Arlington County Board's application to rename Route 1 as Richmond Highway within Arlington County, as we noted in our letter to Secretary Valentine on May 8th. Adopting the same name in Arlington as in Alexandria and Fairfax would provide travelers with navigational consistency. Online navigation tools such as Google Maps have already adopted the Richmond Highway name for Route 1 in Arlington, and this inconsistency with the street signs and the road's legal name is creating logistical problems for businesses in this region, including customers being unable to find their locations. Additionally, some of our chamber members on Route 1 have told us that they have lost business because of the association with Jefferson Davis Highway. One hotelier on Route 1 described a group electing not to stay with them because of their address and solely for that reason. Similarly, one real estate company told of a potential tenant deciding to go elsewhere because they did not want Jefferson Davis Highway to be their address. Based on feedback from our members, the Chamber supports the name change taking effect on October 1st to give all affected business, particularly our smaller businesses, the opportunity to prepare for that change. The Commonwealth has committed to infrastructure improvements on Route 1 that will support development for the entire National Landing area. Changing Route 1's name now would allow these developments to occur with a new and a consistent street name. For all these reasons, the Chamber encourages the Commonwealth Transportation Board to rename Route 1 as Richmond Highway within Arlington County, effective October 1, 2019. Thank you very much for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you very much. Stanford. And we get to spend more time together this week.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Jason Stanford. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance. For more than 30 years, the Alliance has been the visionary leader for regional transportation solutions in Northern Virginia. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak today and share the Alliance's feedback on Virginia's 6-year improvement program and the Smart Scale process. First, I'd like to reiterate the Alliance's support for the following projects: the Second Crystal City Metro entrance, West End Transitway, Richmond Highway BRT, Route 1, Route 123 interchange, and Route 7 improvements between Route 9 and the Dulles Greenway. The Alliance also applauds the inclusion of $241 million in DRPT's 6-year improvement program to build a new Long Bridge rail connection between DC and Virginia. However, the Alliance also remains concerned about Round 3 of the Smart Scale process. First, I want to thank Secretary Valentine and Deputy Secretary Nick Donahue for taking the time to speak with me directly and address some of these concerns. I know you both have spent a lot of time talking about Smart Scale this year, and I appreciate your time and patience addressing this important issue. I would also want to acknowledge how important it is that we have the Smart Scale system in the first place. There will always be a greater need for transportation funding than money available, which was even more evident in this third round of Smart Scale, and why it's so important that we seek to objectively and fairly measure and prioritize the impact of transportation investments. That being said, the Alliance hopes that you will continue to refine the Smart Scale process as you did between the second and third rounds, so that projects are evaluated on their benefit and not their location. In round 2, when evaluating land use, the future job and population density was weighted evenly with the growth in that density. Now the growth is weighted at 30% and the density is weighted at 70%. In round 2, projects were awarded points based on a 0 to 5 scale based on the characteristics of their project, including adding or improving bike, pedestrian, or transit improvements. Now we look at a map of the walkability, and if your project is in an area that is red on this map, which I'm happy to share with you, you receive a higher score. If your project is in an area that is blue, your walkability is low and receives a lower multiplier. As you can see, this process de-emphasizes population growth and emphasizes density and geography. If we're really trying to measure the benefit of a project, we should focus on the impact that that project will have, not where it's located. In addition, the Alliance urges you to maintain the practice of funding projects with the highest benefit score in the third round of the Smart Scale process. The High Priority Project Fund presents a unique opportunity to pool large sums of state transportation dollars to fund projects of great significance. The HRBT is a perfect example of a wise use of that funding. In contrast, 90% of the projects funded in this Smart Scale round involved investments of less than $10 million. Smart Scale's focus should be big picture and greatest benefits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tracy Gabriel? And forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Secretary, and members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Tracy Saya Gabriel, President and Executive Director of the Crystal City Business Improvement District. As the organization representing all the businesses and property owners along Jefferson Davis Highway in Arlington County, as well as the broader Crystal City area, the Crystal City bid strongly endorses changing the name of Route 1 within the county to Richmond Highway, or if so inclined, Richmond Boulevard. Our more than 40 members of the Crystal City bid, who are property owners in Crystal City, deeply affirm the need for a name change and formalize that support in a resolution on the matter at our April board meeting. I have copies of that for you today. We encourage the board to take action to ensure swift transition of the name change as a matter of great importance to our local business community. Approving the name change is good for business, aligns with our vision for the future, and supports continued attraction of talent, companies, and residents to Crystal City and the broader National Landing area. The current name stands in contrast to the values we share as a community, particularly inclusion, diversity, and innovation, so important to a transforming downtown with future-looking aspirations. I say this also as an organization that currently has a Jefferson Davis Highway address. Several of our local businesses can attest to the negative perception and active loss of business associated with having an address on Jefferson Davis Highway. In fact, the general manager of the very hotel we sit in today recently lost a conference booking where the group cited that they were not permitted to actually consider doing their business here because of the street name, and they took their business elsewhere. And of course, there are so many aren't always conveyed by prospective customers or tenants. You also heard others say that renaming is also about practical considerations regarding consistency with adjacent counties and mapping accuracy. I can personally attest to the problems this generates for businesses fronting Route 1. All too often, prospective businesses and visitors to our office are significantly delayed and rightfully frustrated because mapping apps redirect them to incorrect locations. I would be remiss if I only talked about the business community. I walked here on Jefferson Davis Highway to get here today from our office and crossed a school bus with 20 plus children coming out of one of our residential buildings, headed into the school bus to Arlington County Public Schools, a very diverse group of children, and we also owe it to them to have an address that reflects an inclusive future. So urge you to vote in favor of renaming to Richmond Highway. Thank you.
Paul Friedman? Good morning.
Highway, it's a critical element.
You really want to thank us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is speaking as it is, but we'll go forward. First and foremost, I want to thank my delegate, Mark Levine, an outstanding, hardworking effort, visionary delegate who found this opportunity, brought it to our Attorney General, who appropriately acted, wrote an incredibly important legal opinion to support this effort. And then I want to thank as well the County Board in Arlington and all of the speakers who have come before me today, who have all made very, very important comments. I want to associate myself with all of their comments. I want to also thank my own city of Alexandria for taking action on this road prior to this, which, as Christian Dorsey indicated, was a significant factor for the County of Arlington moving forward on this. So I wanted to make sure that I offered all those thoughts forward. And I just want to offer a personal comment in connection to my own connection to civil rights history. So my great-uncle, Sam Friedman, worked with Thurgood Marshall in 1940 to, he was a lawyer in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I was born. And he was asked by the NAACP to step in and defend an African-American who was falsely accused of rape and attempted murder, working with Thurgood Marshall, who had just recently begun the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in New York, who came up to visit him. They together, and ultimately with my uncle leading the way, were able to successfully defend that young man. It was a famous case in New York. Joseph Spell was the name of the person who was charged. That story was made into a movie called Marshall. Came out in October of 2017, and this week at Burke Library in Alexandria, I'll be speaking as they show that movie. And when we think back on this history of racism in our country, we have to recognize the importance of that when you take action on this matter. And sadly, the history that my great uncle Sam Friedman was involved in with Thurgood Marshall, that history is not over. We've just experienced Charlottesville, and it's not that long ago. And the rise, sadly, of white supremacy and groups that are out there who believe that their time is coming again, we can't ignore that. And this opportunity that you have today to make a statement to oppose that is unique. So I hope you'll act and take that opportunity to make that important statement. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much for being. George Schwartz. It's nice to see you again.
Just love it down here, 2 floors down in the basement.
Yeah.
I'm Stuart Schwartz, Executive Director of the Coalition for Smarter Growth. We absolutely support the renaming of Route 1 and very much like the idea and prefer the idea of Richmond Boulevard for Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax for these urbanizing arterials. These are boulevards, they're not highways. They're multimodal places and walkable places. We're here mainly, though, to defend SmartScale, a nationally recognized program that ranks cost and benefits. That's essential when you have only $800 million for $7 billion in requests. And we strongly disagree with Delegate LaRocque and with the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance on this. This call for congestion reduction could cost us billions and billions of dollars. We can certainly see what it costs to expand I-66 at $2.4 billion. And one of the big reasons is induced demand. If you build it, they will come. In metro areas, the highways will fill up within as little as 5 years. And the purpose of congestion reduction from the advocates is just to spend more money to expand these roadways in this failed approach. We can't do that. We have to reduce demand. We were in meetings, very small meetings, with Speaker Howell back in 2014 when HB 2 was proposed. He very clearly saw that congestion reduction was not enough of a measure and that we had to do land use and demand reduction. And he very clearly directed Delegate Stolle to work on it in this way. It was very clear that that was the intent. And it was in keeping with their 2007 actions by the Republicans, working with Delegate Athey, now Judge Athey. There was the subdivision street policy. There was the urban development areas, the traffic impact studies, all of these things intended to reduce the demand on the roadways and the cost to the taxpayers. Transit-oriented development, mixed-use, walkable communities are in high demand. That's why Amazon has come to National Landing, to Crystal City, Pentagon City. That's why 120,000 people have moved into D.C. That's why Arlington and Alexandria are so healthy and doing so well, why Fairfax is investing in Tyson's Corner. Tyson's Corner has saved Fairfax's economic bacon by having that transit-oriented development plan. Fortunately, Loudoun is planning transit-oriented development, and we support it in places like Woodbridge and Innovation, Manassas Park. Anyone who lives or works in one of these places has to be seen as a congestion reduction solution. They're not driving as much. They may not be driving at all. They're using transit, they're walking, they're bicycling. What's wrong is what's happening in Loudoun and Prince William with their sprawl. They keep spreading farther out, farther to the west, into rural areas, places where they want to expand the roads like Route 7, Route 15, and so forth. And so we will expand the roads. They will approve more development that will then crowd the roads. The rural conservation is a big part of this as well, and redirecting growth in these counties into these mixed-use walkable places is the thing to do. Plus, it's economically competitive. That's why Amazon has gone to these places and why other companies are going to these places as well. Lastly, we absolutely have to reduce driving demand, reduce emissions from transportation. We have 10 years to reduce our emissions 80% below 2005 levels to fight climate change. And right now, transportation is our #1 source of emissions. So we all have a role in this, and we'll all be judged by what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholas Brady. Nicholas Braid. Mr. Whitfield.
I'm Rob
Morning
Whitfield.
again.
Good morning. I'm Rob Whitfield of the Fairfax County Taxpayers Alliance. And in the last 20 years, I've been to well over 5,000 meetings on transportation and land use, mostly in Northern Virginia. Over 90%, except in Arlington County, over 90% of commuters rely on the highway network for their commuter journeys. Some people transfer from a car to a bus or to rail, but the bottom line is buses rely on the highway network. I ride the Metro Rail on average about once a month, going mostly to WMATA board meetings and other downtown meetings. The service has improved remarkably under Paul Wiedefeld, and I commend him. However, we are dealing in the smart scale process with a huge misallocation of taxpayer funds. And I propose that this organization should look at a 50-50 split between highways and transit and other options. This time last year, I went to a meeting in Alexandria where the residents were told that the southern entrance was no longer possible because they didn't have it in the budget. Now we're looking at a $370 million metro rail station. My understanding is the ones on the Silver Line were 40 to 60 million. There appears to have been no effort at cost effectiveness and the demand. And so let's look at the Crystal City. If Nick has it, let's see the analysis of prospective demand. In fact, in December at the NVTC meeting in Newington, Matt Kelly of JBG, I asked him, what is the projected modal split for Amazon HQ2? He said, we don't have that information yet. I don't know if Nick has done that in the last 6 months, but in a message sent to you, Madam Chairman, on Monday, I suggested that we need a comprehensive analysis of the entire Pentagon, Crystal City, Reagan Airport area. And I'll be glad to participate in that process. The other main problem, which I asked you about in January, is the fact that only 2 commissioners on the CTB are from Northern Virginia, one from Arlington County and one from Middleburg. Nobody represents the 2 million plus suburban residents, mostly in Loudoun, Prince William, and Western Fairfax. Quite clearly, we are the donor areas, taxpayer donors, for projects inside the Beltway. What I would like to ask you is, now that some changes are being proposed, that a special meeting of the CTB be convened somewhere in Northern Virginia, preferably outside the Beltway, prior to you making final determinations on the smart scale scoring funding update. And I honestly have many more issues which I yet to meet with you. I talked to you briefly, but we need to sit down and understand, because I support certain projects, as Jennifer Mitchell understands. But just to give an example, yesterday's rail subcommittee meeting about a rail industrial project somewhere in the central Virginia, the gentleman's name, I can't remember, I'm sorry, but the project required that cost overruns be funded by the company. There seemed to be a clear plan. I don't have a sense of a clear plan with respect to, the other big one is that the $100+ million major project financial plan requirements for highways, Steve Petard told me several weeks ago, that doesn't apply to transit projects. Well, hello, Houston, it's time for some change. Be glad to follow up with you at some future point in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whip. I am just going to ask one more time, and I may not be pronouncing this correctly. I believe the last name is Brade? No? Okay. Well, that is all that we have signed up for this morning, but we always give anyone in the audience the opportunity to address the board if you'd like to. Okay. With that, we thank you all very much for being here, and we will move into our agenda. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
Moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Thank you. Bronco Vlakic. Good morning.
Secretary Valentine, Commissioner, and CTB Board members, I have two decision briefings before you today. Decision briefing number 1 from the Amherst County Board of Supervisors, Lynchburg District. Commemorative naming of the bridge on US 29 Business, South Main Street over US Route 29, Amherst County, as the Trooper Lucas B. Dow Bridge. The Amherst County Board of Supervisors would like to memorialize the life, service, and contributions of Trooper Lucas Dow to his community. Trooper Dow served 4 years with the Virginia State Police. He was assigned to the Appomattox Division, servicing the city of Lynchburg, as well as Amherst and Campbell counties. He demonstrated acts of gallantry and heroism when he was killed in the line of duty on February 4, 2019, surrounded by his Division 3 tactical team. VDOT supports this request. Mr. Dobson.
Yes, appreciate it, Madam Secretary. Obviously, we had a bridge naming in the Bristol District in Southwest Virginia recently, and Trooper Dow didn't know him, of course, but he was based out of Amherst, the town of Amherst, and the Board of Supervisors passed resolutions that they will reimburse VDOT for the cost of the bridge naming. Seems like a wonderful young man. Some of y'all might have seen the paper or seen notice that his picture was recently hung at the Virginia Police Headquarters on Midlothian Turnpike in Richmond, and by all indications, he's a wonderful young man, and feel very proud that the Commonwealth Transportation Board will approve the recommendation of naming the bridge right near the town of Amherst after him. He served his family, he served the Commonwealth, and he died a hero. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
And would you like to make the motion?
Move that we present this resolution.
Second. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you.
Decision briefing number 2 from the Arlington County Board of Supervisors, Nova District. Approval of the Commonwealth Transportation Board is sought by Arlington County for the renaming of US Route 1 and Virginia Route 110 within the County of Arlington from Jefferson Davis Highway to Richmond Highway, or in the alternative, if the CTB so chooses, to Richmond Boulevard. The Arlington County Board of Supervisors seeks the name change to avoid confusion and to promote consistency in the name of US Route 1 in the 3 jurisdictions, the City of Alexandria and the counties of Arlington and Fairfax. The General Assembly in Chapter 286 of the 1992 Virginia Acts of Assembly named US Route 1 as the Jefferson Davis Highway. The Virginia Attorney General's Office stated in an advisory opinion on March 21, 2019, that the CTB may change the name of those portions of Jefferson Davis Highway located in Arlington County, provided that its Board of Supervisors adopts a resolution requesting the renaming. The Virginia Department of Transportation advises that if the CTB deems renaming of Route 1 and Virginia Route 110 Jefferson Davis Highway in Arlington County to be appropriate, the name Richmond Highway may be preferable over Richmond Boulevard for purposes of consistency. The Code of Virginia, Section 33-2-213, requires a majority of the CTB members to approve a resolution naming a highway or bridge as appropriate. The resolution is provided for the CTB's consideration.
Chair, I move that we rename Route 1 and Virginia Route 110, commonly known today as Jefferson Davis Highway in Arlington County, to Richmond Highway.
Second.
Any further?
Madam Secretary, I was going to ask, just want to be sure Mr. Walton's here. Now, the General Assembly obviously changed the name in 1922, which is almost 100 years ago, of course. I guess my question is, will we be having more requests coming from this body? There's a number of highways named after different people. And I didn't know if we in the future might be, and I support the resolution, but we might be overrun with requests to change names. I didn't know what the direction is for the future.
I'm going to address that under new business.
Okay, thank
So we're
you.
just going to deal with the resolution at this point, but I think you do raise a very good point. I would like to read a letter from the governor that those of us on the board did receive from him. And he writes, "Dear members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, thank you for your service to the Commonwealth to improve our transportation infrastructure. We've made significant progress on transportation over the last year and a half, and I look forward to our continued efforts to keep Virginia moving. I urge your support for the resolution renaming Jefferson Davis Highway in Arlington County to Richmond Highway. As the board, you have the authority pursuant to 33.2-213 of the Code of Virginia to name highways, bridges, and other transportation facilities upon receipt of a request from a local governing body. On April 25th, Arlington County requested that Jefferson Davis Highway, Route 1, be renamed Richmond Highway in the county. With this change, the name of Route 1 will be Richmond Highway from Fairfax County to the Potomac River. While it is necessary for us to honestly discuss and interpret Virginia's history, I feel strongly that commemorating the President of the Confederacy through the name of a major thoroughfare is not appropriate. Thank you for your consideration of my request, and again for your service to the Commonwealth. Together, I know we can move towards a swift resolution of this issue in a manner that best honors and reflects the history of all Virginians. Sincerely, Ralph S. Northam." All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you all so much for being here. With that, Mr. Donahue.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we have two resolutions before you this morning. The first deals with the smart scale consensus scenario, or the modifications to the staff recommended scenario that we discussed yesterday and have been discussing with you all over the past several months. The resolution lays out through an attachment all the modifications that were concluded in yesterday's presentation. Your vote today would signal to staff that this is the smart scale scenario that you would like them to develop the 6-year improvement program on, and that would be before you for your final vote in June. And so, Madam Chair, an affirmative action this morning would memorialize the board's support of the staff recommendations and modifications presented yesterday to the board.
Motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Madam Chair, the second resolution you all have before you this morning from the office, the Secretary's office, is one that would establish the Interstate 81 Committee. As we've discussed before the board in multiple instances, the 81 legislation that was signed into law by the governor on April 3rd requires the Commonwealth Transportation Board to establish an Interstate 81 committee consisting of 15 voting members and 2 ex officio members. The purpose of this committee is to provide advice and recommendations and to ensure the engagement of local and state elected officials along that corridor as we work to implement the I-81 corridor plan and turn it into an I-81 corridor program with the newly dedicated funding streams recommended by the governor and approved by the General Assembly. In addition to that, there's a second be it resolved in the resolution that would direct the Secretary to reach out to the various planning district commissions along the corridor. So that's planning districts 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, as well as the Speaker of the House to request members for the I-81 committee. The Senate Rules Committee has actually already approved their membership to the committee, and then once we've received responses from those bodies for their members, to work expeditiously to schedule a first meeting so that that committee can elect a chair, a vice chair, and organize itself.
Yes, I make a motion for this.
Any further discussion?
question, please. I'm a little concerned with time. When do we expect to have a committee affirmed, in as much as this committee's work is supposed to be submitted by the 1st of December? We're almost halfway through the year.
Madam Chair, Mr. Whitworth, I think the Secretary has told me that if you all act in the affirmative, that she would like us to ensure that our outreach begins immediately to these other bodies. Candidly, part of our ability to organize the initial meeting will be predicated on the timely response from the other entities that we'll be reaching out to. And so we'll also be reaching out to you to help us ensure that we get timely responses from some of those planning district commissions and other entities. I think once we have all 15 members, we can quickly move forward with scheduling a meeting.
Just want to assure Mr. Whitworth that that process is well underway. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Ms. Brown? Good morning.
Madam Secretary, members of the board. I have 3 action items for you today. First, item number 5 is the approval of the FY20 high volume unpaved road program allocations. Last month, I made a presentation on the application cycle for this year. We did receive 3 applications, each asking for the maximum $500,000 for a total request this year of $1.5 million. We are recommending the board approve the allocation to the 3 counties that submitted applications: Isle of Wight, Loudoun, and Wythe counties.
I have a motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Second item, item number 6, is the action on the FY20 primary extension improvement program allocations. Again, last month I made a presentation on the application cycle for this year and provided recommendations for primary extension funding. There are a total of 84 pavement sections of primary extension that are recommended for funding this year. You do have a list of those recommended projects in your packet. One attachment B includes all of the recommended projects in order of their score, and then attachment C provides a listing by district. We would recommend the board approve these recommended allocations for primary extension funding.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Madam Secretary, I'm sorry to bother you. We go back to the previous vote we did. I'm looking at attachment A, but Washington County is in the Bristol district. It has Hampton Roads district. Didn't know if you knew that. Ms.
Okay.
Brown. Huh? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't think there's 2 Washington counties in the state. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Never a bother.
The third item is number 7, the action on a requested revenue sharing reallocation in the Salem district. Henry County and the Salem district has requested to establish an existing project, the Dick and Willie Trail, as a eligible project under revenue sharing, and a transfer revenue sharing funds from a completed project to this project. The Dick and Willie Trail project will provide for the design and construction of an approximately 2-mile long multi-use trail from an existing location in Martinsville to Spruce Street. The project will be administered by Henry County and is estimated to cost $1.67 million. The requested funding transfer of $126,000 with an equal local match will allow the project to remain on schedule and be advertised December of 2019. This project does meet the revenue sharing transfer guidelines, and we would recommend your approval of this request.
Madam Chair, if anyone is wondering what Dick and Willie is,
We were actually wondering down here, Mr. Smith. That's why we have you here.
that was the name given to a railroad that ran through that area once upon a time, and I would move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Stinson. Any further discussion?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smoot. Mr. Caples, good morning.
Morning, Madam
Secretary, members of the board, I have two items for your consideration this morning. The first item is a plant mix contract in the Culpeper District. We had 6 bidders on this project. The low bid was within the range of the evaluative estimate. We find that it represents both market value and a good value to the Commonwealth and recommend for your approval.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. The next project is order number A61. This is the Laskins Road project in Virginia Beach, in the Hampton Roads District in the city of Virginia Beach. We had 4 bidders on this project. After conducting our bid analysis, we have found that the bid represents a fair market value and recommend for the project to be awarded. I will add a couple items here to this one, as the chief engineer was discussing yesterday. With those 4 bids that we did receive when evaluating those, 3 of those 4 bidders all viewed the project similarly. Their bids were within 10% of one another, so it was very tight, as the chief engineer was talking about yesterday, and the range of estimates and the range of bids. All three of the 4 bidders bid this project very similarly, viewed the risk very similarly, and we did consider, due to the funding shortfall, rejecting all bids and possibly re-advertising the project, or redesigning the project and re-advertising. But due to recent market volatility and the time and cost associated with that, we felt that moving forward with the bids as received was the best available option. So at this point in time, we are recommending for your approval of the award.
Madam Secretary, I ask we approve this. Second.
Any further discussion?
Secretary, so this is what, 38% over what the estimated construction cost was?
For the budgeted cost, yes, sir.
Okay.
We're having that task force. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Thank you. Let's see. Ms. Pryor, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Secretary, members of the board. I have 2 regular items for you today. The first is the amendment of 2 projects to the program. One is the purchase of nutrient credits along the I-81 corridor, and another bus and shoulder transit zone project that will be reimbursable from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. By way of background, before you ask what a nutrient credit is, nutrient credits, we purchase them.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
We purchase nutrient credits to
We're obviously not talking about nutrient credits next door.
try to make
Oh,
it more
no, it's
exciting. So.
Probably not having the same meeting. I don't know.
We purchase nutrient credits to support post-construction water quality requirements. They reduce our long-term maintenance costs associated with projects. In the I-81 corridor, the nutrient banks are becoming, the availability is becoming limited, so we'd like to go ahead and purchase the nutrient credits needed to support the 63 projects in the I-81 corridor plan. So that is what this item is, and I recommend your approval.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Thank you.
Thank you. My second item is just the normal monthly transfers, and I recommend your approval.
Aye.
While you're here, I think we can move right into new business. So we'll have 2 items under new business, and this is one.
Okay. The first item is the approval of the Smart Scale budget increase to support the Laskin Road Award that Mr. Caples just presented. It was discussed yesterday as part of the Round 3 consensus scenario, using funding, construction district grant program funding from the Hampton Roads District to support that budget increase, and I recommend your approval.
Secretary, I ask for approval.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you, Ms. Pryor. The second item I was just going to mention, as part of the question that Mr. Dotson raised, given the opinion the Attorney General gave following the request from Delegate Levine, You're right, we could receive many opportunities to do this. And so as we move forward, I've been giving thought to, should we consider having a task force where we put together and look at guidelines, consistency within districts across Virginia. Several of our thoroughfares corridors, cross boundaries, as we all know and understand. The issues with 911 and emergency issues that could come up, the timing of issues, official namings versus commemorative namings. We could be just dealing with a lot of issues, and so I am going to be giving some thought to that. I've spoken to a few board members, but if anyone would like to be a part of that, just let me know, and we'll come back. We want to make sure that we are working with the General Assembly as we do this, and want to make sure they're aware of the guidelines that we intend to put in place as well.
Madam Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Whitworth.
A question that I was going to ask earlier, but I didn't want it to cloud the vote. But I do think it's important to know when there is a name change, such as the one that we've just approved, there's bound to be significant changes in signage. Who bears the cost of that, and do we know the cost of that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would just say that it's borne by the locality, and when Arlington considered it, they had a price attached. I don't remember what it was. There are also issues of working with the post office on people's actual addresses, and again, I think that all falls to the locality.
The applicants all understand where the cost is borne on us.
They certainly did in Arlington, Mr. Whitworth.
Okay.
I can't attest to anyone else.
Madam Secretary, I think it was around $17,000 that they had read in a news article, Arlington County have to pay. Although there's individuals who have to change their stationery, their.
There are times and there are differences. There are times when we're going to be replacing the signage as a normal part of our business. Then there's the delta that is dealt with if we change the name. And so there are various issues, but Ms. DeTonk was really one who approached me about, the cost issues with some of this. But just to make sure that as we go forward, we're very aware and informed about the impact of these decisions. So that's why I thought it might be good for us to kind of take that outside the board discussion and bring it back with some recommendations.
Madam Secretary, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think less than 3 miles here, 2.8 miles, but you talking about Lee Highway, Route 11? That's more than 2.8 miles. I mean, you never can tell where we might go with this. Thank you.
Secretary, that conversation brings up a point. Is there a transition plan to make this change to minimize the inconvenience and other issues that may arise that we haven't even thought about at this point?
But there may be some that we haven't thought about since we're actually renaming versus just naming the road. So I think those are issues that could be discussed. I think in this particular case today, we're actually being consistent with what's already been decided in Fairfax and in Alexandria. So this is very straightforward. But as we go forward, Mr. Malbin, that could be an issue as well.
Just, outreach to the businesses impacted,
Yes.
any confusion that this type of change may occur short term. So.
Madam Chair, it might be, I'm thinking about our station policy on the rail side, where we've been very clear about who needs to be consulted, and there needs to be documentation. And in this case, I think we heard testimony today that both the Chamber of Commerce and the Local Business Improvement District were heavily involved in the outreach. And Chairman Dorsey said they went to every business who had an address and talked to them. So I don't doubt that they covered all their bases, but if we're going to move into this area, it's perhaps wise to document it in the same way we have with the station policy, so people know what to expect.
I continue to thank Director Mitchell for getting that station policy together. And remember, too, that the resolution must come from the locality. So a lot of that work is done before they even come to us with the resolution that the locality has to pass.
I think there's a requirement that they actually do a public hearing. You can't just do it as a consent. You have to offer the public the chance to comment at your meeting while you're.
just these questions make me realize that perhaps not everyone knows all the entire process. So I think that would also be extremely helpful. Okay, with that, any other new business? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned. Thank you.